Hello guys, welcome to my new video, and today we're talking about healer, keybinds and macros. And after I made the video, I highly advise you to watch this about Grid2 and Clique, because I'm going to assume you know about Mouseovers before watching this video. I got a lot of questions about my healer keybinds. How do I optimize my offensive use of Holy Shock? How do I optimize my defensive or healing Holy Shock? How do I keybind this? How do I do the same thing on my Discipline Priest with Penance? How do I, or which macros I use in Mythicals and Raids? And this video is going to be covering all of this, and all the macros are going to be listed in the description below. You can copy it and things like that if you want to. And first of all, before I'm going to be talking about keybinds and all that stuff, I want to differentiate between different styles of healing and the fact that I use Logitech G600 mouse. So all of a sudden, like many mouses out there, you will see that they don't generate new keys for you. Instead, they're going to map keyboard keys onto your mouse keys. So this is why you see N1, N2 all over the place. This means this is my mouse key 1, mouse key 2. It's not my left click, right click, it's the side buttons basically. So it's going to be mapping to number 1 and number 2, and it's going to be different for other mouse users and things like that. So keep this in mind in case you get confused. Second of all, there are multiple ways of using or healing in Mythicals, Raids and PvP environment. First of all, let's talk about some of the PvP environment or most common ways of healing it. So first of all, if you go click escape, you go to keybinds, you'll notice that if you go to targeting, that there is a ways of targeting self, targeting party member 1, member 2, member 3, member 4. So all of a sudden, a lot of PvP players and some high-end Mythic Plus players will use this way of targeting and casting heals. So for example, if I press my F1 key, I'm targeting myself. And if I press a keybind associated with my heal, like Holy Shock, which is on E, I'm going to cast Holy Shock. So all of a sudden, in a lot of PvP environments, people will just use their keys to target party member 1, target party member 2, and cast heals on them that way. Which means it's going to free up your mouse. You won't have any accidents where you mouse over in the wrong target and things like that. So all of a sudden, this is used in a lot of high-end PvP, and some high-end Mythicus pushers also use this to help with the camera work as well. So this might work for you, but you need to know, like, you know, party member 1 keybind, party member 2, party member 3 and things like that. Now, what happens in the raid environment when you have 10, 15, 20 people? This is impossible. You cannot really do this, and all of a sudden, Mouseover macros are the most optimal way of healing. Now, what is Mouseover macros? A lot of the people who are coming into World of Warcraft, they might be like, hey, I need to select a target and then click my ability to heal, like E, Holy Shock. Okay, that's fine. Now I need to select another target, I need to select them and click my healing ability. Instead, you can do, or you can make your mouse do all the work. You don't have to select them or target them, you just have to mouse over the person. If you mouse over the person, and if you use add-ons like Clique, or if you use Mouseover macros, you can use or press the key associated with your Holy Shock, and it's going to heal them instantly without having to select them. So you're saving that millisecond of whatever. And all of a sudden, if your class is really, you know, favoriting haste or doing heroism and things like that, your global cooldown is going to be reduced. You have to remember, every time you use an ability, you see this little clock going up. You cannot cast anything during that time after you use one ability. That's called global cooldown. Global cooldown is affected by haste. And all of a sudden, if you're playing like a Holy Paladin who's really reliant or really enjoys haste when they pop their Holy Avenger and Wings, you need to be really quick about selecting or healing the right people. So for example, if you're a Holy Paladin, you pop Holy Avenger, you pop Wings, and maybe you have Holy Shock, you need to be casting or doing Holy Shock, Crusader Strike, Holy Shock, Crusader Strike type of deal. What if you need to select what if you're not using Mouseover macros, and for example, you're pressing targeting, Holy Shock, and then you can't press Crusader Strike because you don't have the boss selected. You have to target the boss, Crusader Strike, Holy Shock. You can see it becomes a mess. A total mess. Again, there's macros to help with that, and I'll talk about the macros, but generally speaking, optimizing your healing by having Mouseover macros is going to save you, you know, a couple of milliseconds or whatever, but over the duration of the fight, it's going to add up. So Mouseovers are becoming really, really popular. So I use Clique. And I covered this in the previous video, and this is my Clique keybinds for Holy Paladin. I'll talk about my Clique keybinds for other healers as well. But how do I deal with these offensive abilities like Holy Shock, where I can use it offensively to DPS a target, and I can use it defensively to heal a target? As you can see, I have left mouse button keybinded to Holy Shock. So all of a sudden, if I need to heal somebody, I can just hover over them and click left mouse button. and that's gonna cast Holy Shock. And I also have a second keybind. You can see here, Holy Shock keybinded to E. So this is going to be my offensive one. This is the one that I'm going to be DPSing. So if I tab or click on a target, if I have an enemy selected, I can click E, and that's going to cast Holy Shock offensively onto them. Or if I click left mouse button on myself, even if I have a target selected on myself, it's going to be casting Holy Shock onto me, onto the player. So this is how I differentiate between defensive use and offensive use, and I'll talk about the penance as well later on. So I never make a mistake of casting or wanting to heal a person but using it on an enemy instead. This is how I differentiate. Now, another macro that I use for Holy Paladin, which is used by a lot of Holy Paladins out there, and I have to talk about this, it's going to be the Crusader Strike macro. And a lot of people will be using this. It's going to be listed in the description below. So this macro here means that it's going to target the closest person to yourself with the Crusader Strike, even if you have someone like a friendly target selected. So all of a sudden, like I mentioned before, if you really want to do that whole target party member 1, target party member 2, or whatever type of deal, you don't have to select the boss. You don't have to select the boss. You can even select yourself. You can go to the target and you can click Crusader Strike. And you can see I still have myself selected, but I'm casting Crusader Strike onto the boss or onto the closest enemy. And this becomes really, really important. For example, how many times have you had this happen to yourself? You pop Holy Avenger, or you pop Holy Avenger, you pop Wings, and you have, I don't know, someone else selected. You have a friendly person selected or something like that, or you can't cast your Crusader Strike. Someone's out of range or whatever. It's you wasting that time. You're wasting your whole Crusader Strike Holy Shock time because you have someone else selected or something like that. And this is going to help with that. This is going to help with that because it's going to target the person who's closest to you without having to lose your current target. And people might find this macro pretty useful depending on what playstyle I use, but generally speaking, you can see my click keybinds here. I use Holy Shock for left mouse button. I have right mouse button keybinded for casting Beacon of Light. I have shift mouse wheel up with Light of Dawn. I like this whole, Light of Dawn, you putting heals out. So I try to keybind my mouse wheel up to that because I feel I use the same keybinds across multiple characters, and muscle memory is going to be really, really important. For example, you can see my flashlight is shift left mouse button, and I use the same keybind for Healing Surge, Shadow Meld, Regrowth, and things like that. So I keep the same keybinds across all characters to some extent. And this is going to be my click setup for Holy Paladin. Let's go move on to Discipline Priest. So let's go to Discipline Priest, and Discipline Priest is very similar to Holy Paladin in terms of keybinds because you have Holy Shock. Holy Shock is, you can use offensively and defensively in the same way that you can use Penance. Penance can be used to DPS a target and heal them through atonements, or you can use Penance to directly heal them. So all of a sudden you'll see that Penance is also keybinded on my OR keyboard button. So if I target a person, I can press OR and it's going to cast a offensive Penance and it's going to DPS them. Now, in the very similar way, I also have Clique keybind where I have Penance keybinded to my middle mouse button. So all of a sudden, if I mouse over myself and press middle mouse button, it's going to cast Penance and it's going to heal me instead. So this is what I mean by having offensive and defensive keybinds and how I separate them for my Discipline Priest and Holy Paladin, which have those abilities that can be used in two different ways. Now, keep in mind I also have a macro, which I feel is relatively important for a priest. I have a Smite macro, Smite Penance macro. So the fact is, if you cast Penance, you'll have multiple bolts shooting out of, or Penance is going to shoot out multiple bolts. And usually after that, a lot of people will go into Smite spam. So I have a macro here, show tooltip Smite, cast non-channeling Penance Smite. And this is going to prevent me from cutting off the last bolt of Penance when I want to cast or follow up by Smite. Because a lot of the times, your DPS pattern is going to be something like Schism, Penance, Smite. So I don't want to cut off the last tick of Penance. So this means that if I cast Penance and if I cast Smite, even if I spam Smite while Penance is channeling, I will not cut it off. And I'm going to do this as an example. So I'm casting Penance and I'm going to be casting E, which is my Smite. And I'm casting E and it's not casting Smite, it's only casting Smite after penances completed. So just an example, in this case we're going to be using just a normal smite on my E keybind, and you'll see that after I cast my penance and I'll be smashing my E button, it will cut off the last penance cast based on haste and things like that. So I'm going to cast penance and then mash my smite button. You can see here that the last bolt was being cut off. So this is why I use this specific macro to optimize penance into smite type of deal, and I feel it works pretty well. And this is my generic keybinds for Discipline Priest. Like I mentioned before, I'm using very similar setup. Shift left mouse button for Shadow Mend. You can see here I'm using the same type of deal. Muscle memory across all different characters and things like that. Clique can really help out with a lot of different keybinds, like if you have Halo, if you have Divine Star and things like that, they can be global cooldowns. By global I mean they don't need a target selected. So my Divine Star is shift mouse wheel up because I'm shooting out the Divine Star. I'm shooting it out, so this is why I have my mouse wheel up, keybinded to abilities like that, which are kind of like projectiles. You'll see it being shoot out with shift mouse wheel up. And this is what I try to keep across multiple characters. Now very quickly I want to talk about Angelic Feather, because this is a very, very common macro that all of the Discipline Priests or Priests will be using, because generally speaking, if you have Angelic Feather, and a lot of people will use Angelic Feather, if you just have it keybinded to a certain button, it's kind of like a 2 mouse click button situation. Again, you can assign Angelic Feather to multiple locations, and it might be useful if you want to give speed boost to certain classes that are very slow. But generally speaking, people will be using this macro right here, which will use at player command, and this is going to place Angelic Feather at yourself. And now I have this macro keybinded to my mouse button, and when I press this mouse button, which is my mouse button number 6, it's going to use at player to place Feather right underneath me, and it's going to give me speed boost instantly. So it's almost like a speed boost ability. It only requires 1 click, you don't have to mess around with it, and it's going to be very, very useful in situations where you need instant speed boost. Now let's go have a look at some of my rest of Druid macros that I have and keybinds and things like that. So this is my Clique setup for rest of Druid. You can see here left mouse button is my rejuvenation. You can see that shift left, like I mentioned, it's going to be regrowth. It's going to be a direct heal across all of my characters and things like that. You notice that my middle mouse button is Swiftmend. I also have different things here, a macro to do with focusing and casting Entangling Roots and things like that, but I'll talk about it a little later on. I first want to talk about Essence macro. And an Essence macro, this macro right here is used by a lot of people, including myself. It's definitely very useful. So show tooltip Heart Essence, use Mouseover Heart Essence. This Heart Essence modifier here is going to associate any major essence that you have equipped, and all of a sudden it's going to be a Mouseover. So for example, I have, in this instance, I have Crucible selected. Now, I have a certain macro assigned to Crucible, and if I mouse over, let's say, a friendly target and I click it, it's going to cast Crucible onto them. So straight away, this is going to create a mouse over macro for any major essence. For example, this is so great because you can go and swap your major essence. Let's say you're going to use Well of Existence, and you want to, again, you're going to add some overhealing, so there's something to heal, and you don't have to change anything. You can use the same keybind, you can use the exact same keybind, and if I want to go and use the overhealing stored and heal a person with just a mouse over macro, I can just hover over them, use the ability, and it's going to cast onto them. So this macro is going to be used regardless of what major essence you have, and it can be very, very useful. Again, you can copy it in the description below. Now, in terms of other abilities that I use for my Restoration Druid. Now, I have different abilities, like you see, I have different keybinds or different action buttons added on my Feral Affinity. I still have things like Tranquility and Innervate added here, and my Cloak, because even if you're in Feral Affinity and then all of a sudden someone needs healing, I use Tranquility, or if I get the Cloak procs, like, the eye and things like that, I need to be able to get rid of them and keep DPSing. Besides that, I have all my Feral Ability or Feral Affinity abilities, like, you have your Ferocious Bite, you have your Rip, you have your Shred, you have your Rake and things like that. You can see Num1 is my mouse button 1, and I use this for Wild Growth. So if I cast, or if I mouse over on a person and I press Num1 on my mouse, it's going to cast Wild Growth. But if I go onto my kitty form, and if I don't have a mouse over on my mouse at this given point, I'm going to be casting Swipe. So all of a sudden, if I feel like, oh my god, everyone's taking so much damage, I'm still casting Swipe, but I want to cast Wild Growth, I just mouse over myself and cast the same button, and it's going to be using Wild Growth instead of Swipe. And this is what I mean by optimizing one keybind for multiple different options, and I do that throughout my Rest of Druid because Rest of Druid has a lot of these abilities with Feral Affinity and stuff like that. And how do I do it? I just have Wild Growth keybinded on my Clique with num1, and I use it as default friend. And I don't even have a keybind on Clique for my swipe, I just have it bound a specific button. So now let's talk about common Resto Druid jobs in Mythic Plus, and that is CCing. If you're doing things like Atal the Priestess boss, you notice the shield spawn multiple lands, and a lot of the times people don't want to kill those lands, instead they're going to CC them. And as Resto Druid, you have Entangling Roots, which can be a very, very good, useful tool to CC mobs. But how do you optimize the whole process of CCing and keep DPSing or keep healing? And this is going to be done through focus frames and adding focus targets. So I have a macro set up here. You saw it before. I have middle mouse button is going to be Swiftmend if I have a mouse over target. But if I don't have a mouse over target, I have this macro here. This macro here is going to add the current target as a focus target or remove it if I click it again. So, for example, if I have this target selected and I want to CC this, I select this target and I click middle mouse button on anywhere on the screen with except myself. Focus frame added. I have this target on my focus frame all of a sudden. If I don't want this target to be on my focus frame, I click it anywhere else, middle mouse button, it's gone. If I use my middle mouse button on a Mouseover, like myself, it's gonna cast Swiftmend. So now this single ability has multiple different uses. And how do I do this? Again, how do I do the CC with Entangling Roots? I have a specific macro for Entangling Roots. Again, it's going to be all linked. Show tooltip, it's gonna cast Entangling Roots only on a focus target frame or focus target player. So all of a sudden, I want to CC this guy because this is the ad happening from Atal the Priestess boss. This ad needs to be CC'd. I select it, I use my middle mouse button to focus frame, and then I cast Entangling Roots. Now, you can see my Entangling Root duration here. I do not have to have this target selected. I can DPS. I can keep DPSing here. This guy right beside it with my Solar Rats, whatever. I'm DPSing. I can see on my left frame that Entangling Roots has 16 seconds left. I can cast the macro T for my Entangling Roots, and it's going to apply it without switching targets. So this is what focus frame is going to do, and this macro is going to do. Regardless of what target you have selected, if you have focus frame, it's always going to be cast onto that player. So this is why I can cast abilities, DPS and stuff like that without having to swap targets, and it's amazing for when you have to keep a target CC'd and you need to make sure that they're not going to break out and you still want to optimize your DPS or healing or whatever. Like, for example, I can still click, I have no target right now, I can still use my mouse over macros, and then I cast my Entangling Roots and it's going to cast on a player. And then I can click or use my middle mouse button on anywhere outside to remove the player frame or focus frame, and all of a sudden it's gone. And now I can move on to the next party member or whatever. And this is my keybinds for Resto Druid. Again, this video was extremely long. I covered only specific healers because those healers, or at least I have a lot of macros or very different keybinds for those healers. Again, you don't have to copy everything. Keybinds are very personal, they can be very different. You can see what I'm using, the macros I'm using, they might help you out for your Discipline Priest, for your Holy Paladin, for your Druid and things like that. Let me know if you have any other really good macros that you want to share. Put them in the comments below. I'm going to try them out. Maybe other players are going to learn from it. I want this to be a learning experience for everyone because, again, if you start healing for the first time, there's a lot of information that you might not know, and you were like, God, I wish I knew about this much sooner. This would have been much easier for me. Help each other out, guys. If you enjoy the content, please do subscribe. It really helps out the channel and it helps me to keep doing these kind of videos. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next